The hallway that left the cargo room headed straight toward the stern. Junpei and the other three proceeded down it, silently. Some distance along it, a large room opened up on the left-hand side. It looked familiar. An iron grate covered each of the elevators. Junpei and his companions drew to a stop and began to discuss what their next move should be. "We've seen this elevator before." "We got off on the one on the left just a little while ago." "Then we went through the number 6 door, and that took us to the engine room." "Yes, and after that we passed through the cargo room." "And now we're back here." "In other words, we made a loop. We're right back where we started." Junpei approached the elevator. Gently, he pushed the triangular button on the wall next to it. A moment passed. The elevator door opened. And shut. Pushing the button had apparently restored power to the elevator. The elevator was now functional. "What do we do? Should we return to C deck?" "No, this hallway keeps going. Even if we do end up going back, I think we should see what's down there first." "I agree. Let's go." Their decision made, Junpei and his companions left the elevators behind and continued down the hallway. Sometime later, Santa, who had been walking several paces in front of the rest, suddenly stopped. Set in the wall in front of him was a door. So far as Junpei could see, there was no other way to proceed. It was the door or nothing. "All right, let's open it." Junpei took a deep breath, readied himself, then grabbed the doorknob and pulled the door open. He paused for a moment, then stepped through into the room. And there he saw the number that had hung over their heads since they'd woken up. 9. Like the numbers on every other door, this one too was a rough shape made of red paint. Its door was set into the back wall of the room. Junpei leapt toward it with a sudden burst of hopeful energy. It was a large double door, heavy and full of solemn importance. He grabbed hold of the door handle and shook. Nothing, but he hadn't expected it to open. The red sat on the wall next to the door, its screen read vacant. Finally, they'd found it. Junpei felt himself overwhelmed by a torrent of emotion. At last, they'd found the exit, but his cold gripped his heart, and he knew all too well why. As he stood, frozen, unsure of what to think or feel.
Jumpy, look! Behind you!
He spun around, and couldn't believe what he saw. It was a door with the number 9 written across it. Was there a second door? Why? Junpei's voice was barely audible, even to himself. He stumbled toward the second door, as if somehow compelled. It was a small, single door. It sat in the starboard corner of the room, on the same wall as the door they'd entered from, but in the opposite corner. 9. There was no mistaking it. A red sat on the wall next to this door as well. Junpei shook the door handle pointlessly and muttered to himself, Why? Why the hell are there 2 doors? It was Santa who answered. There were always 2 doors. Just think about it. Zero never said, there's only one door with a 9 on it. It is hidden, but an exit can be found. Seek a way out. Seek a door that carries a 9. Of course, we just assumed that there was only one. After all, why would there be more than one? Oh man. Jeez. Junpei was stunned. Zero's trick had taken him completely by surprise. There were 2 doors. That meant that all 9 of the people who met at the central staircase could escape and leave no one behind. Now the reason for the bracelet numbers being 1 through 9 was clear. Divided in 2, the digital root for both teams would be 9. For instance, 1, 2, 7, and 8, and the rest. The digital root for both teams would be 9. Or 2, 3, 4, 9, and the rest. The digital root would also be 9. There were many other workable combinations, but they all ended the same way, with a digital root of 9. What did that mean? The answer was quite simple. From the very beginning, The nonary game had been designed to save all 9 people. Zero hadn't been lying. Zero had never said there's only one door, but anyone who found themselves in the game would have assumed that was the case. Fights would have broken out. One team would likely betray or deceive the other. Someone might be hurt. Someone might get killed. But eventually, they would reach the room Junpei now found himself in and realize the pointlessness of whatever violence they'd visited upon each other. There were 2 doors. No need to kill each other. They'd understand and be appalled, overwhelmed with guilt at what they'd done. Perhaps that was the purpose of the game. That was how the nonary game was meant to be played. Fortunately, they hadn't started to fight one another, at least not yet. But if one misstep was made, if the wrong mistakes happened, the stakes would rise and the noose would tighten. The thought of it sent a chill down his spine. So, what are we going to do, Junpei? A voice broke through Junpei's frantic thoughts. Santa's voice. It brought Junpei back to his senses. No use worrying about the future. He needed to figure out what they're going to do next. There were 4 people in the room: Ace, Santa, Junpei, and June. Their bracelet numbers were 1, 3, 5, and 6, so the total root would be 6. In other words, the 4 of them couldn't open the door with the number 9. But what if there were only 3? Could door 9 be opened with 3 of them? It took him no time at all to determine the answer. There was only one combination of 3 people that would give a digital root of 9. 1, 3, and 5. That would mean... No! We gotta go back! There wasn't a possibility. That wasn't a possibility he was willing to consider. Santa and Ace agreed. Yep, I agree. We cannot leave June behind. Junpei let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding.
Are you sure? I don't mind staying.
Junpei's body betrayed. June's body betrayed her false feelings. Her true feelings. Good Lord, read the sentences. Her eyes were wet with the beginnings of tears, and her legs shook. It's okay. There's no way we'd leave you behind. Santa had said what Junpei had known the moment he realized which 3 people could go through the door. Besides, I'd rather drown at the bottom of the ocean than escape with this sausage fest. Maybe I'll get to go to Atlanta. Are you sure you don't mean Atlantis? Oh, right. Huh. Perhaps it was the sudden reassurance that no one wanted to leave June behind, but Junpei laughed harder than he had in some time. Ace and Santa smiled.
You guys...
June blinked tears from her eyes and bit her lip. She didn't seem to know what else to say. Very well. Best we head back to C-Deck, then. We should be able to take the elevator we passed earlier. Perhaps Clover 7 and Lotus will have returned from door 1. Even as Ace spoke, they knew finding the others wouldn't improve the situation. There was no way they could be split into teams that could both go through the doors. Ace knew it. They all knew it. But there was nothing else they could do. They would find the other 3 and search for another solution. All right, let's go. Ace looked at all 3 of them, then turned and headed through the door. Santa and June followed. Junpei started toward the door, then stopped. He'd been too busy with other concerns to notice the room itself. It didn't seem terribly important now, but what exactly was it? Junpei looked around the room, for the first time noticing the things that weren't doors with 9 on them. A red carpet ran between 2 columns of wooden benches that ran the length of the room. The carpet began at the large set of double doors and ran toward the bow, toward... Junpei wasn't sure. Was it an altar, perhaps? There was a small rectangular alcove at the end of the carpet, and inside the alcove was a raised platform. Resting on top of the platform was a coffin. A coffin? A coffin? What on earth was a coffin doing in a place like that? But before Junpei had time to answer that question... Hey, Junpei! The hell are you doing? Let's move! Santa's voice echoed in from the hall outside. Right, okay, I'll be right there. Junpei turned on his heel and left the quiet, somber room. they took the elevator up to C deck. Once there, they headed back toward the main hall and the central staircase. It didn't take them long. Junpei found Seven and Lotus waiting for them. They didn't look happy.
We got a problem.
Clover's gone.
Junpei and his three companions looked at one another. He turned back to Seven and Lotus. What do you mean, gone? Santa, Ace, and June had their own questions to ask. When? Why? You two went into door 1 with Clover, didn't you? Seven and Lotus responded as best they could.
Yeah, we went through the door together.
But Clover barely spoke to us.
She just did her own thing the whole time.
There were 4 rooms on the other side of door 1.
She wouldn't let us into the 4th room.
She just said, I'll take care of this one.
And shut the door.
She must have locked it with something on the other side.
We waited for a while, but Clover didn't come out.
We called for her, but she didn't answer.
So I kicked down the door and we went into the room.
But
It was empty.
Clover wasn't there,
There was a door on the other wall.
and it was open.
We figure she opened the door and left by herself.
We ran after her, of course, but
Well, obviously we didn't find her. You figured that much out.
Clover's gone.
Junpei thought for a moment. When did this happen?
We got here just before you.
You certainly have excellent timing. So you haven't searched anywhere other than near the staircase?
No, we haven't.
Finally, Ace spoke. His voice had an edge of resolve and concern. Very well then, we'd best separate and look for Clover. We haven't much time left. Let's begin. There were quick nods all around, and the 6 remaining players spread out. Junpei and June ran to the central hospital room and looked around. She's not here.
No, she isn't.
They searched a little longer, but with no luck. They couldn't find Clover. Finally, they gave up and left the central hospital room. Slowly, they made their way back to the hallway. At last, they reached the stairs, and Junpei spoke. Alright, I'm thinking we should probably split up. I'll head back to the stairs and take the elevator down to E deck. June, you can take the stairs up to B deck.
All right. That sounds good. But,
What?
could you stop calling me by that code name when we're alone?
Huh? Oh, sure, right. I'll do that. There was a reason Junpei persisted in calling her June even when they were alone. Although perhaps not the best reason. He was embarrassed to call her by the nickname he'd used when they were children. Canny. 9 years ago. It came naturally, after all. They were children. But now that they were adults, it felt strange. Regardless of what he might hope for, to call a woman he wasn't dating by such a childish nickname felt odd to him. Of course, to call her Miss Kurashiki would have been even more awkward, and simply Kurashiki would have been a little brusque. And although he couldn't put his finger on why, it felt somewhat forward to call her Akane when they hadn't seen one another for so long. In short, it was simply easier for him to call her June and leave it at that.
All right, I'm going then.
Yeah, be careful, Canny. June, or perhaps more appropriately, Canny, blushed and smiled.
You be careful too, Jumpy.
Yeah, got it. Take care. Junpei looked after her for a moment as she ran up the stairs, then turned around and took off for the hallway. Tragedy always strikes when one least expects it. But to wait for a man to stand before striking him down seems almost crueler than dealing the fatal blow while he lies on the ground. A light in a dark place. June's smile had given him hope, both for escape and possibly for something else. It was that hope that raised his spirits just enough that they might soon be fully dashed. He opened the elevator door, and there she was. A woman sat, slouched against the wall. Lotus. Junpei felt his blood turn to ice. Her body was limp, and her skin smooth and pale as always. was covered in bright red blood. Junpei felt his chest constrict. He couldn't breathe, and his legs began to shake. A slow, cold drop of sweat trickled down his back. He felt his stomach somersault. Junpei's mind went blank. All his thoughts replaced with endless, hissing white. Driven by little more than instinct, he began to walk toward Lotus, slowly. Each slow movement of his stiff limbs brought him closer to her corpse. Finally, he stood next to her. Robotically, he bent down and put his hand against her neck. There was no pulse, no rise and fall of breathing. She was slightly warm. Something somewhere in Junpei's shaken mind told him that meant she had been killed recently. Yes, Junpei thought, his mind slowly returning. She had been killed. Someone had killed her. There was a deep cut on the left side of her chest. Blood still oozed from it, though clearly her heart had stopped beating some time ago. The weapon had been a knife, then? Perhaps she'd been stabbed in the heart once. She would have died immediately. He took little comfort from knowing she must have suffered very little. Only then did Junpei notice. Lotus's bracelet was gone.
Lastly, let us discuss how to remove the bracelets. There are only two ways to do so. 1. You escape from this ship. 2. Your heart rate reaches 0. In other words, once the bracelet is taken outside the confines of the ship, or detects that its wearer's heartbeat has fallen to 0, it will shut down automatically.
Was that why the killer had ended Lotus's life? So that they might have the number 8 bracelet? If that was true, then the killer was whoever wanted the number 8 bracelet. Or perhaps more accurately, the person who would gain the most by obtaining bracelet number 8. Who is that? Who would benefit the most from the number 8 bracelet? The thought had only just entered Junpei's mind when he heard a noise, a sound like a sharp knife cutting through wet meat. It struck him as strange that the noise came from inside his own body. A moment later, the pain hit him. It wasn't merely pain. There was heat, extreme heat as well. He felt as though molten iron had been splashed against the side of his body. Finally, his brain made the connection. He had been stabbed. But where? His body was quickly going numb. He couldn't tell where the knife had met his flesh. Given the circumstances, however, he had most likely been stabbed in the back. Whoever had killed Lotus had now done the same to Junpei as well. His voice was little more than a weak groan. With what little strength he had left, Junpei turned his body, trying to catch a glimpse of his attacker. But as he did, the knife dug itself in deeper, twisting viciously. He collapsed to the floor, a puppet with its strings cut. His arms and legs lay where they fell, oddly twisted and awkwardly positioned. Junpei's body was entirely numb. He could feel the blood leaking out of him, but nothing would move. Nothing, save his eyes. As he lay on the floor, his life ebbing away, Junpei finally saw his attacker. 2 tiny images of the killer reflected in his eyes. When that recognition came, nothing. He felt no emotions. Not anger, not sadness, not regret. The paralysis that had claimed his body had reached his mind. His killer glanced down at his body. Then, without a word, climbed into the elevator and was gone. His eyesight began to fade. The world grew blurry and began to dissolve into an empty, white fog. The fog crept into the edges of his mind and worked inexorably inward. Soon it swallowed up the last that remained of Junpei's mind, and his consciousness left him. There was nothing more. Into utter emptiness he fell. Into 0. Whatever Junpei had been was gone. Bad end. There you go, folks. That's ending number 2. That is... Oh, hello. Would you like to keep the information you've gained? Yes, please. If you look over on the left side there, you'll see which ending we have now received. It'll fill it in. The knife ending. pretty cool. I gotta say, I think that's the playthrough where you finally start to get, well, I guess we haven't gotten that much more information, but we've definitely got some new questions we want to answer. Like, we don't know who killed Snake. We don't know who killed Junpei, although apparently he knows. There's not a lot of good doing him now. No, let's not play the demo over and over. And we don't know who killed Lotus. Assumably the same person who killed Junpei, I guess. And then that knocking? What was that? So we have a lot of questions to answer, and everything will be explained. But we've got 3 playthroughs left of 999. And so basically we've done the submarine ending, which in my opinion is the worst because you learn nothing. You just basically did everything wrong. You solved the puzzles and got a crap ending, that's it. Then you get the knife ending, which is slightly better because now we've seen the doors. Both of them with the number 9. Is that all of them? Is there more than that? Do we need more than that? Does it change things? How is that going to change the outcome, basically? Now it's like, now if everybody lives, everybody can get out. But obviously at the ending there, even if Junpei hadn't been killed, with Snake gone, they don't have the number 2. So there's no way for them to... He is 2, right? I think so. They don't have a way to open both 9 doors. So some people are still going to be left behind. I think the most they could take through would be 5. And even then, one of the 5 would have to be the 9th man, who's also gone. So there's only 7 people left. I think only 4 of them can get out at that point. So pretty bad. Pretty bad. And the next playthrough, we're basically gonna, we're kind of alternating here which puzzles we're going through and which paths we're taking. So the next playthrough will sort of be like an echo of the first one, except we're gonna do some things a little differently, and we're gonna do some stuff right that we did wrong the first time. And it'll get us the slightly better ending. And then there'll be the 4th playthrough, where we'll finally start to unravel some shit, and the 5th playthrough will tie it all up in a neat little bow and explain everything in a really cool finale. So thanks for watching. See you next time when we start playthrough number 3.